Today's sponsor, ladies and gentlemen, is once again Manscaped. Now, last time we were here, we were talking about how scared I was putting blades up to my balls, but Manscaped was there to help me through the process of fear and finally move up to my nose and the ears. They've produced a product called the Weed Whacker, which comes with their skin-safe technology, which, like I said, putting blades up to my balls, 99% of people fear. The 1% of you are wacky indeed. But for me, I can weed whack my nose and ear hairs with style and grace. And let me talk about long nose hairs. I once went to a job meeting and totally embarrassed myself. Still got the job, but I spent the next hour ripping nose hairs, and let me tell ya, it hurts. But the Weed Whacker comes with 9,000 RPMs and 360 degrees of rotary dual blade systems, meaning you'll get every freaking hair imaginable. Plus, it's also water resistant if you're a little wet up there, you know what I mean? It also comes with cordless rechargeable batteries that last up to 90 minutes. And then it also comes with a replaceable blade every 3 months if you get the Peak Hygiene plan, which I do recommend. So yeah, please use our code and you'll get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Keep those pubes trimmed and nose free of weeds. Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, a longer video than usual, right? As you all know, once in a month I have committed to a bigger video than usual. Sometimes you might get them twice in a month. But ladies and gentlemen, today's topic is me using God's operating system. Now I might be like, whoa, that's a bold claim there, Muta. God's operating system? What are you doing? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, today we're deep diving into good old TempleOS. Now, if you have never heard of TempleOS, TempleOS is devised by Terry Davis, who, quote unquote, in his words, is one of the smartest programmers who has ever lived.
Do you want to know why? Do you want to know why I'm the best programmer in the world? You see this? This is the trend. It starts with hello like this. First year, new professional, seasoned professional, and master programmer. Okay, guess what? I moved it backward. And that's why I'm the smartest programmer that's ever lived. I took something that wants to be cluster and I made it simple.
You know what? I'll give Terry something, okay? Less code, the better, the more optimal. Terry is, without a doubt, not just a dumb programmer, if anything. Terry is an individual that has a master's degree in electrical engineering from Arizona State University, pretty much mastered assembly code during the Commodore 64 era, which Terry is also pretty old school. I mean, I've met plenty of computer scientists that are super old that have definitely mastered the era of early computing. The machines he used to develop were VAX machines. He worked at Ticketmaster as a programmer. You might be like, Muto, what's a VAX machine? And that's a good question. Let's use good old Google to figure that one out. VAX is a line of computers developed in Digital Equipment Corporation. So he was programming on these? Oh, damn. Terry really is a vintage lad. Holy shit. Here's the important part, the context for the story. The native VAX operating system in Digital VAX VMS, renamed to OpenVMS in 91 or 92, was ported to Alpha, modified to comply with POSIX standards and branded as compliant in the XPG4. So this is like early OpenBSD, BSD technology. So our boy Terry was really into that Unix programming lifestyle, which a lot of programmers typically pick up as they go through. Now, not only was that the case, but Terry designed God's operating system, which, as a programmer and people who know anything about programming, computer systems designs and things like that, making your own operating system, compiler, and kernel, and everything that goes the root of your computer is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. This does, in fact, prove Terry's aptitude in the computer science field to an extent. Now, it was around 1996 that Terry had started to develop various mental illnesses, or at least was diagnosed with them, if that's the better word. One of these early on was bipolar disorder, and then later on Terry was diagnosed with full-on schizophrenia. And it was throughout these mental illnesses that later on Terry claimed to have talked to God himself. himself. Now, the big man upstairs pretty much wanted to build the third Jewish Holy Temple after succeeding the current second Jewish Holy Temple, but instead of God telling Terry to do /creative and start building a temple on his own, no. Terry decided here's another way. Terry was going to build the operating system. Why God would choose to send a temple in the form of a fucking operating system, I don't know. You gotta ask Terry if he was still alive, but that being said, Terry did in fact go through with God's revelation, because in 2005, Terry released an operating system called the J operating system. I actually don't know off the top of my head if it's the Jesus operating system, but I'm going to call it the J operating system. And then in 2013, it was rebranded to something much more rolly off the tonguey, which was TempleOS, which we all know and love. Now, before we begin, I know there's a lot of people who've probably watched other videos. There's a lot of other videos on Terry Davis specifically, ones that cover his entire past and his history and a lot of his troubles. There are some racist rants that Terry has done, and I'm going to show you pieces of them, some of his more like really off-the-cuff stuff, so viewer discretion is actually heavily advised for this section. So let's go through a couple of these real quick. Here's an infamous one called Glow in the Dark. Now, you're going to hear a lot of beeps going forward, but here he talks about, in the most politically correct way I can put it, bioluminescent African-American federal agents, okay? There are gamer word equivalents. I'm not going to go there because it's very offensive, but this is one of Terry's most infamous rants.
The CIA glow in the dark. You can see them if you're driving. You just run them over. That's what you do.
Now, okay, I'm not condoning anything Terry said over there at all. That is very, very reprehensible, but it's a showcase to show you, especially in the beginning of it, to add more context. Obviously, Terry has some clear mental problems. However, Terry is also some fucking weird visionary, because on this, like, entire thing, he's got Putin, God, Jon Snow, Star Wars, God, China virus. Oh my God, election. Dude, Terry, relax. His operating system is, like, planning things in the future. Jesus Christ. This is a video from 2017. Terry was on something back in the day, let me tell you. Here's an infamous phone call that Terry got. Let's listen to this.
I can't understand you. What'd you say? Do I see the fun in GCC? Hell no. I'm a white man. I wrote my own fucking compiler. I'm not a like Linus. I'm a professional. I started at Ticketmaster.
Okay, it seems a lot of Terry's rants have to devolve into like some fucking weird racist white supremacist shit, which no one should stand by. But for those adding context, somebody called him and asked about the GCC compiler, which is something that we use to build programs underneath Linux. There he called out Linus Torvalds, who is the actual author and the father of the Linux kernel himself. I don't know what spawned this anger, this hatred towards Linus Torvalds, but yeah. It seems Terry considers himself a cut above.
Let's pray for the souls of the Linux atheist and their leader, Mr. Torvalds.
I think the CIA is after me. But to see him go on a tirade, it's going to hurt it. But again, take into account that Terry doesn't exactly have everything going on right upstairs.
Bill Gates and the Illuminati got a herd of cattle. Ooh, we got a herd of cattle. We got a herd of cattle. They got a big herd of cattle.
Yes, he does in fact say the gamer word like fucking 90 times during this entire fucking ultimatum and everything going on forward. So yeah, this video got age restricted by YouTube. Obviously, let's be fucking real. If it didn't, we'd have to ask some questions. But yeah, this is just Terry's mind going at it. I mean, I'll be 100% real with you. You can kind of see from all of his rants that he doesn't exactly take too well to everybody else who's very influential in the computer space. Bill Gates, Linus Torvalds. I mean, if you find anything else, you might find something about Steve Ballmer that he's going to just completely lose his shit over. So yeah, he thinks himself a cut above everyone else. He's got that God complex style deal, which is fittingly so for what he's actually going to set on to his life's later endeavor.
I like elephants, and God likes elephants. Here's a realistic elephant.
See, not everything that he does is a complete racist rant. Sometimes you come across really wholesome shit like God-loving elephants. God bless, dude. I really... Terry is a weird guy when he was there, man. Terry, you went way too soon, brother. Let me tell you.
Do it like a white man. A white man uses an ISO file. This is the way a white operating system is installed.
Yeah, me too, Linus. Me too. Oh, that is bad.
When God listens to a song, what pleases him is sex with a...
Okay, all right, stop, Terry. Okay, Jesus Christ. Ah! Ooh! All right, you know what? I think that's enough of Terry. I think if it's one thing you can understand, Terry is a very eccentric individual when he was alive. His mental illnesses definitely caused him to say a lot of this stuff. And, you know, I've heard a lot of people write this guy off as some crazy white nationalist, racist nut job. And you know what? I'm honestly going to say it for a fact. Maybe Terry was a racist. Maybe Terry didn't like the color of my skin. Maybe this was the truth that Terry had internalized within himself until he was finally given no filter and he could have gone out and doing what he did. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, with all of that said, I wanted to show you this because I think every other channel might have already shown you this kind of stuff when they were covering Terry Davis. But Terry Davis, to me, is a very, very intelligent programmer. And what he has done that we're about to see in the second part is no short of a magical feat for a lot of people. There's a lot of programmers that wouldn't go to the depths that Terry did. And we're about to go right into that. So now that we've gotten past Terry Davis himself, let's go to part 2 and go load up God's operating system. Now, unfortunately, as you all should know, Terry Davis has passed away. He passed away all the way back in 2018. His death is written off as a potential accident or maybe suicide in some case. It's not exactly identified as what it is specifically, one way or the other. Terry had unfortunately passed away after, impacting with the train and things like that. So Terry, unfortunately, is not here with us anymore, but his operating system is now kept as some sort of digital tombstone for all of his life's work to pass into. Now, this website over here says you can download the free public 64-bit operating system, Temple operating system. Now, there's also other various downloads. Terry also adds, I think, speed updates for Linux, QEMU virtualization. He has, TOS distros, light distros, supplemental distros, which are actually C files. And then he's got, the TempleOS ISO and the ISO Lite. But we're going to download the full fat experience and get the actual TempleOS ISO, which is only 16 megabytes in size. So it's not the largest operating system in the world by far. So we're going to download this, and you might be wondering, Muda, can you run it on actual official hardware? Yeah, actually you can. There's a YouTuber out there that you can actually go to who is showing himself running this exact operating system underneath a ThinkPad, a laptop from 10 years ago. So it is possible to get this running. I unfortunately could not on any of my hardware, simply due to the fact that TempleOS doesn't really work well with UEFI BIOSes. I don't think it even works well with original legacy BIOSes, simply because there is something in the operating system and in the boot process that just doesn't work well with certain hardware that's now commonplace on systems. So the only way to really use TempleOS, all right, for most people is to run it under a virtual machine, which we are doing. We're running it under VirtualBox. So let's get to it. Let's mount it and let's run this bastard, okay? Now, for virtual machine's sake, all right, what I am running this on is a 6 gigabyte system, so 6 gigs of RAM and 8 cores. The reason I'm giving it 6 gigs is since this is a 64-bit operating system, it should be able to recognize memory values and register them above 3 gigabytes or 3.5 gigabytes. So immediately one thing to consider is TempleOS boots really fast, and obviously I shouldn't be shocked because it's a 16 megabyte operating system, and yeah, it loads up exceptionally quick to a very simplistic 90s GUI that honestly will reflect a tiling manager. That on the right side, it's a basic directory structure system, and on the left side, a bit of that is also reflected. But you also get asked the question if you want to install this to a hard drive, yes or no. Obviously, I hit yes. It installs really quickly. One thing to note too is, despite that Terry did advocate using this on a VM, he really doesn't have any form of GPU acceleration, meaning that immediately upon booting, I wasn't able to resize anything on the display. So you can see that I'm trying to do it, auto size it or trying to find a resolution prompt, but there's none. So you're kind of stuck using this in 800 by 600, and a lot of that probably has to do with Terry really relying on very basic GPU, the very basic GPU, virtual GPU that is used on virtual machines anyways. So yeah, around here, effectively all that's left is to, start up his operating system and actually have it installed. And it goes through a pretty fast install. All of it is done through a script that he wrote, And within like a matter of like literally 10 seconds, you're done. So now it's time to unmount that drive that you installed TempleOS with and reboot. And when you reboot it, boy, oh boy, do you get the question. Terry has his own bootloader as far as I know. Like, he doesn't tap into anything open source. The way that it works is Terry asks you if you want to boot off the old boot record. It never worked for me. Drive C and drive D. Loading in both C and D does the same thing. Okay, like it boots into the same operating system. I don't know what the key difference is. So honestly, I just go with drive C because it's, you know, what the root should be. But yeah, once you load it in, it starts decompressing a dictionary, which takes, again, a second. And then you can take a tour of the operating system. Now, the operating system is very, very basic in terms of how it's designed. At any moment, you can hit F5 on your keyboard, and you can compile whatever is in that window as far as I see. So you can actually start programming nearly immediately as you jump into the entire thing. As far as shell prompts and things like that are considered, I don't think... It didn't really launch me into an entire shell to begin with, but it does have a shell. It does have its command line system, so to speak. On the right, you can see a little window pop up that basically tells you can, in fact, left-click, right-click, do whatever you want. So there is mouse support in TempleOS. So in many ways, it's future-proofed, and in a lot of ways, it's fucking lacking. Now, I might be like, but Muda, does God let you game on TempleOS? Oh, boys, you gamers. Of course God lets you game on the operating system, silly. Terry's got a whole bunch of them that he's programmed by himself, for all things. And some of these are fucking impressive, which we'll get to. Now, Terry has these classified under fun games, unfun games, code scraps, and miscellaneous extra tools that are never meant to be games to begin with. I think it's safe to say we should go cover all of them. So here's Titanium, which is a scrolling shooter from the era, and as you can see, full graphics and everything. I'm flying over a city, just blowing all these tiny pixels out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it does in fact. And it crashed, by the way. It actually did crash on me. I don't know why it crashed. Maybe the 6 gigs of memory I gave the operating system wasn't enough to contain such fucking holiness. But it also spiked at like 16% CPU usage on one core. Now, remind you that this did in fact detect all my multiple cores. It doesn't scale well across multiple cores. Terry pretty much uses one core, and all the other cores that you give it pretty much use 1% of it, which is like nothing. Like, those cores are dormant. You could pass this thing as many threads as you want, but I don't think Terry really developed multi-threaded applications that effectively. Now here's Black Diamond. Now this is basically skiing, except I couldn't control it, and there was like literally no fucking collision detection. But the map did scroll, so that's kind of cool. Nothing really that impressive. There's also Flap Bat. You might be wondering what the fuck is Flap Bat. And Flap Bat is basically me flapping my wings and trying to eat these tiny particles that all pretty much statically flow in the wind. The whole goal is to eat all of these particles. And do you think that I did it? Oh, hell yeah, dude. I beat the first fucking level entirely. Look at this shit. There was one up there. Now, there is a problem with this, okay? You have to spam the space key in, like, perfect momentum to do this, all right? Because that's how it works, right? You have to, like, rhythmically tap it so that the bird can fly. I'm kind of failing right here, but eventually I get the hang of such gaming, and I eventually beat the level. So that was my first and probably only game that I ever finished on TempleOS. Here's Varoom, and this is crazy. Full 3D driving engine. You got a 3D model and everything. You are actually driving in the world of TempleOS. So again, may I remind you, Terry programmed all these games on his own. Terry programmed the fucking driving game into it, and it works pretty well. It has some collision problems, yes, and I hit a game over, but he got a full driving system in, man. Come on. You gotta be impressed by that to an extent. I don't know what this has to do with God, by the way. I don't know if God really planned on F1 racing cars back in the day, but sure. Now, you may be noticing there's no sound. And yeah, you're right, there is no fucking sound. What can I say? Now, this is like Flat Top or Fish Top or something, and it looks like Battleship, but I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. It looked like I was just... I was way out of my depth here. I think what's going on is, like, each ship has to send out, like, missiles to blow up each other, but I have no idea, okay? Like, some of these games are, like, way above my pay grade. Bomber Golf is the next big game, and as you can imagine, it is a game all about flying a stealth bomber above enemy lines, as far as I know. So you gotta blow up the pink tanks, driving as the blue stealth jet. And I didn't know what exactly to do over here. Like, I guess one thing changes your entire direction, but the bomber can actually be moved in this, like, open area. And you can, in fact, drop the bombs. I just couldn't figure out the key, and I also couldn't figure out the objective, really. And it also doesn't seem like there's any difficulty in this at all, Terry Davis, if you were still alive, because there's nothing shooting me from above. Maybe I'm on the first level, maybe that's how it works, but my CPU spikes were the highest during this game, so there was a lot of fucking back-end calculations going on the stealth bomber, that's for sure. All right, so this is a basketball game that Terry has, and can I just be real with you? This is like basic artificial intelligence. It's a bunch of Roblox characters. I mean, well, Minecraft Steve versus Purple Steve just going at each other. And then the AI, I gotta say, you know, he's got ball dribbling, he's got everything going on, it's calculating fouls, they're tossing at whatever. I don't know what the goal of any of this is, there's no nets or anything, but the AI is totally acting anonymously, okay? Like, I'm not inputting anything. I thought I was, but I just sort of stood back. I mean, you know, maybe, I just don't get it. I don't get what's going on. Half the time the characters are colliding into each other, and sometimes they're just tossing balls everywhere they go. Some of them are just off screen the entire time. I am generally confused. And like the first time I could ever imagine I had to abort this. Maybe God wasn't going to be happy with that, but I really had to abort this fucking mental cesspool of basketball gaming, if you will. Here's another game where you sheep her, where you like herd sheep the entire time. This might be more reminiscent of what you'd expect out of the Bible, right? Maybe more so than F1 cars and stealth bombers and basketball players. No, the whole goal here is to basically use your mouse, left click, and you're trying to guide these sheep into a pen. Now, I'm going to fucking say for the record here, I've never liked this game type on any game that I played. I hated doing it in Twilight Princess, and I hate doing it in TempleOS. It's not that fucking fun. I don't know who gets their rocks off to this kind of gaming. Half the time, these things will not listen to you. They don't care. These are the dumbest groups of animals that I've ever fucking found, okay? So if a meteor struck this world and ended it right now, I would not complain whatsoever. Let's play Excalibur. Woo! Let's get into it. Yay! And this is Excalibur, so it's kind of like Asteroids, except there's other enemies shooting at you, and I died. You know what? God bless. I'm not going to give it an attempt. I'm going to abort it like good old God intended. So let's... Actually, God didn't intend that. Holy shit. All right, so we got Menslas. All right, and you might be wondering, what is this? And before we begin, can I just say for the record, it has a fucking story mode to it, like a full storyline. Good King Menslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about deep and crisp and even, rightly shone the moon that night. Okay, yeah, you know, it's fine. All right, winter fuel. Let's get to it, baby. And if you're wondering, oh, is the game as good as the story? No, you just light up branches, and I guess you're trying to warm up the people over here while also not colliding with your fucking giant house. Yeah, I don't really get the gameplay over here. It's certainly could be better. All right, a lot of these games have the problem of not really having a plot. It's kind of like Action 52, except if it was made with a holier twist in hand, right? You know, for fun games, these aren't really that great. Now, here's one that he's got called, like, I think this is like sort of a RTS style deal. I'm the blue team, and the purple team is like God's Holy Knights. Now, you would think that the whole goal is to Zerg rush the enemy, which ideally you would win. Now, you're supposed to use your mouse to sort of guide them away from it and run towards the enemy, but like, dude, I don't get what I'm doing here. I'm just losing. Like, it's like I'm like absolute dumb white blood cells going like, they're just so organized, and I'm so disorganized, and I hate it, and none of these games are fun. Let's go to the unfun games. Maybe they might be. Actually, no, they're gonna be fucking more unfun than this shit. Yes, Terry did in fact classify some of his games as unfun. I don't know what the fuck would be unfun. I don't get it. But we'll click on Talon and see exactly how unfun this is. What? Woo-hoo, boy! Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be like, what the fuck, Muda? What's going on here? Terry Davis didn't just design his operating system. Terry made a flight simulator and a game out of it too. As you're seeing, this is a full 3D location. The whole goal here is to fly as a bird and start picking fish from the ground. It's a lot harder than it looks, but Terry's got a full flight simulator. Now, of course, usually the graphics start to screw up, and that's because I think that Terry isn't, maybe not the best 3D pro. I mean, he is also designing an OS. Sorry if he screwed up the game a little bit, But yes, this is a full 3D open world environment that you can in fact fly through. And I was a little fucking baffled at this, by the way. All right, not only is it a 3D environment, but he's got like depth to mountains. He's got like multiple characters. He's got like oceans, mountains. It's like, in a way, I almost wonder if some of this might be slightly procedurally generated. Maybe initially, because obviously when you start in, you see the same areas as you fly around. But dude, this is like crazy what Terry's come up with. It's a whole flight simulator. Yeah, it's not going to give Microsoft Flight Sim a run for its money, but come on. It's pretty impressive what one person single-handedly has done. You gotta admit, he's even got a little animation work on the bird. Now, of course, I never captured any of the fish because I'm not good enough to play this game. Let me be fucking real with you. But I'm impressed. I am impressed. It's more fun than half the other fun games Terry put in. Jesus. All right, is a shooter called Castle Franken. All right, now you might be wondering, oh, Terry's made a shooter. Obviously way more fun than any of the other crap, but it's got a little Doom vibe, Wolfenstein deal to it. And the whole goal is to basically shoot down these Frankenstein-looking deals that just run across the map really hardcore. Now, there's no death state to any of this. I don't think Terry put that. But yeah, it's a full 3D engine to an extent. Like, he's got obviously 2D sprites, but he's got 3D locales that he can run through, and Frankenstein's constantly running back and forth. Like, it is very interesting tech. It might not be a finished game, but again, what one person did with his own programming language that he wrote, his own compiler, his own kernel, also decided to have the spare time to write a 3D game engine shooter as well. That is some impressive shit. That really is impressive. Now, here's another game that's sort of like tanks, if you will. This is Zone Shot or whatever the heck it is. And as you can see, it's not really 3D, but it's kind of like battle tanks, like Atari stuff, where you're fighting these tanks in this 3D space. Obviously, they're in like this desert, and he's just blowing them up with these like blue Jolly Ranchers. And yeah, nothing special, but kind of way more fun than the other fun games he had. I'm noticing a pattern. So here he has like a battle zone game, and like here he has like a risk game or like some strategy game, and this is kind of wild. You can actually write your own AI into this. Okay, so if you go into the source code language for this stuff, you can actually go script your own AI. And you might be wondering, script your own AI for what? Look at this game real quick. So this is a simple AI. It is literally calculating every single move and fighting amongst each other. Like, this is some crazy game. Again, all he was doing was building an operating system. He is also a game developer, and a relatively competent game developer too. He actually made some of these games to nearly full completion. I could bet if all you wanted to do was play some of these games, you actually just could. Terry wasn't just a programmer for an operating system. He programmed the application suite that came with the operating system. This would be like a third-party job, but Terry did it all in one, like the master programmer that he actually is. He's got like a dungeon crawler NetHack style deal. I mean, it's not finished, but he's got a whole fog of war system and everything. My God. Dude, Terry could probably port Dwarf Fortress to fucking TempleOS if he wanted to, man. God, he went way too soon. I really wish I could see more development on this stuff, man. Terry was an absolute genius. Now, we looked at a lot of his game suites, which obviously on a first glance, a lot of people would look at. That's kind of what you would see in a dive. But I want to show you some of the stuff behind the scenes that kind of really does set itself apart real quick. Now, when I said earlier, Terry didn't just write his own operating system, TempleOS. He wrote the actual programming language, which is HolyC. And there are other programmers that have dived into the actual HolyC programming language and have discovered the quirks with it. It's based, I guess, off C, but for quick comparison's sake, the way that you program, as far as I know, it doesn't really have like a main function. And what's really also important about it is it's written in sort of a sequential style, meaning that everything Terry does is he defines things first, then he programs everything in like succession. So basically he basically flowcharts his code from top to bottom. And as soon as you hit F5, it compiles the code using his own compiler for HolyC, his own programming language, and emulates the game. You can actually do this right now. If you look into the source code for games like Talon, his flight simulator, you can scroll through the code. You can see where he defines the the actual 3D models. Like, they're actually rotating in the window manager. You can see where he defines the graphics, the skyboxes. Then he designs the flight systems, the world generation, everything. You can look into every aspect of his code. And for the world that he made, even as simple as some of these games are, he really doesn't have a whole lot of code. A lot of his code is written somewhat simplified in a way, right? Like, Terry is big on simplicity. It's sort of a core tenet of TempleOS. And as he writes this code out, and as you can compile it yourself, you can make your own changes, you can run this code, and it will work provided you haven't screwed up any of the mathematics or logic behind it. It's actually really fucking cool stuff. You can write programs like Hello World, and again, as simple as one line. Programs that you would probably write in like a bunch of lines in another programming language can be written somewhat relatively simply over here. In fact, we're going to look at this a bit later on, because there are people who have ported Terry's operating system and have actually written Discord clients for it, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, here are some examples we're looking at of like Hello World, which is the tutorial program that most programmers will write in just to sort of get their foot in the door for any programming language. In Terry's case, he writes these program files into HC files or whatever, they're source code files. And if you hit F5, you can compile this code and basically have it execute on the operating system. Now here you can see that he's got things like Hello World. Now I said earlier there wasn't anything like a required main file, and there isn't. Anything outside of the main file when you're programming underneath TempleOS is just read like in order of top to bottom. In fact, there's actually like an analysis. Here's one from Harrison Toddy on his GitHub right here, where he talks about switch statements, and this is in this programmer's words. Terry explained multiple times how switch statements are the most powerful constructs in HolyC. In the language, switch statements always utilize jump tables in assembly, and thus the documentation mentions not to use them in cases with sparse large value ranges. The ones in HolyC offer quite a range of convenience improvements over the C counterparts. For starters, HolyC offers experienced programmers an unchecked variant of the switch expression. He definitely had a vision in his mind, right? Like, God definitely did speak to him, at least on some weird metaphorical level, on how to design like updates to an already established code set. So yeah, Terry is no dumbass. But again, it is also not a perfect operating system. To turn your entire source code like design into almost a shell prompt may not exactly be the smartest way to go, and we'll get to that, of course, as we go due time. You can even write simplicity is the goal to keep the line count down, so it's easy to tinker with. No, it turns out, simplicity makes it faster in some ways too. It never switches privilege levels. Newer changes address maps, everything pretty much had kernel level access, and now a lot of people would say that, Muda, that seems like a security nightmare. I actually completely disagree, because if you haven't caught on to something, this doesn't have any network access. Terry's operating system didn't decide to connect to the internet. I guess because the internet is filled with really terrible Rule 34 and absolutely disgusting, deplorable shit, that Terry decided maybe it was ideal not to input a network stack. So might I add, what's the point of worrying about a Ring 0 operating system that runs everything alongside the kernel if you have no network stack to run? Like, even if you were to get malware on, what the fuck are you gonna do? Have it send out to a non-existent network? Come on, man. Now, Terry isn't stupid. Terry actually designed it this way because this is how he grew up. This wasn't some revelation from God. Terry grew up in the era of the Commodore 64, where effectively the end user had pretty much all the power on the computer. Privilege levels was never really a thing that Terry believed in because of how he grew up and what he was most comfortable with. It's not that he didn't know the importance of it. I'm sure that he did after he designed all this. It's just that's the kind of ethos he was going for in his operating system. Now, being with God himself in a much better place, free from the demons that he kept on this earth, Terry, unfortunately, cannot develop the program for us mortals down here on the earth right now. And again, I like to say, God bless, I'm glad that Terry is in a much better place. He definitely had a rough last couple of years dealing with homelessness, and just it really gets to you, okay? When you look at all the rants Terry went on, all the racist stuff, all the tirades, a lot of it really was just compounding, not only with the mental illnesses he went through, but also because living on the streets, man, that shit is tough. There were moments where fans came up to him, and genuine fans, and Terry lost his shit on him. But what do you expect when you have to deal in a homeless scenario? People will become rougher to deal with if they're presented with that lifestyle. But I like to see that Terry also believed he had genuine fans and people following him. And I guess in some ways, as rough as his life was towards the end, there were a lot of genuine fans that came by, they had their interest piqued, and And even though I'm being really fucking nice right now, there's definitely a group of actual losers and smooth brains who actually harassed and bullied Terry throughout the later stages of his life when he was dealing with homelessness, and his mental issues definitely compounded. It was never okay, and it's never ever okay in any situation, even if it's somebody that's not going through all of it. And those people have to be mentioned and fucking shamed for this entire situation too. So while there were a lot of good fans for Terry Davis, there were also equally a lot of assholes as well that picked on an individual that had already these many low points to deal with. Nobody can say that Terry Davis didn't know what he was doing. Terry Davis, you can't just shit out a kernel, a compiler, an operating system, your own fucking programming language, and then also a flight simulator if you weren't at least talented. And Terry, nobody can take away from the fact that he was a talented individual. Which is why Terry's operating system, even if it serves no practical usage, let's be real, it is still followed by a lot of people who want to walk the path of, well, not necessarily walk the path of Terry Davis, but keep his memory alive. And that's where we're going to be looking into the two projects that are still here. So one of them is ZenithOS, which is a modernized professional fork of the 64-bit Temple operating system. Guiding principles of development include transparency, full user control, and a adherence to public domain and open source implementations. Now, here they got a GitHub where GitHub even recognizes that 99.4% of this is HolyC, whereas 0.6% of it is in fact heathen. So it comes with a full ISO that you can actually download and get running, and this is a pretty freaking awesome ISO. If we actually boot this up into TempleOS, you can see that it starts off with a much more pleasing to the eye color scheme, recognizes multiple cores, and actually is far more usable, at least in terms of how it presents its UI. It's got this dark theme to it, a little a little detail of what it is on the right while it's installing on the left. A lot of this is effectively just TempleOS down to a nutshell. It just comes with modern day changes to it comes with that modern fork that you would expect. TempleOS definitely was dated. ZenithOS is something that I wouldn't say is a daily driver, but hey man, people were committed to make it somewhat work, and somewhat work they did. Now, it also comes with several games, like, for example, a full version of chess that one can play with other people, or in fact an AI. That was great. It also did, in fact, come with plenty of the original games. I don't know, some of these were redone, some of these were worded differently. It definitely does come with that original source style. So over here, you can see that you can still see the original source code for a lot of the programs and a lot of the games that they made in typical HolyC style, where they're all just read sequentially. Of course, you can see Skybox at the top. Hitting F5 renders the game. You can even modify values, such as where this hose, for instance, starts, just by going down the source code and changing it to your heart's content. There's a beauty and simplicity to how HolyC is designed. Once you get your hand around it, there's a lot of powerful stuff you can do with a lot of the built-in software that's present right there. And again, being that it's its own programming language with its own kernel compiler, you can actually write your own standalone software for TempleOS if you're willing to go through that, which some people definitely are when we look at our next project. Now, this is Shrine Systems, or Shrine, so to call it, which is a big update to the entire TempleOS world. It's a very connected, easy-to-use operating system. Key differences are it actually includes a Lambda shell. It includes a shell for you to actually write things into. It actually includes a package installer right here. You can actually list packages, install them. So it has actual network access. Now, this is a massive deviation from TempleOS. Terry never had a network infrastructure. Terry never had all these assets that they're providing. So some would argue this is more of a heathen operating system, and it sort of deviates from what Terry's initial design really was. But you can download it, run it on hardware or in a virtual machine. And to show you how it runs, it effectively looks precisely the same as you would expect TempleOS to, except with a slightly more bluish, sky blue scheme going on with it. Not as pretty as ZenithOS, but hey, for people who are making an open source equivalent, pretty damn good. Setting up network isn't exactly too difficult, but it really isn't that worth it, to be honest with you. In fact, aside from the package managers and the network, there's not really much that's different in ShrineOS to set itself apart. I would actually argue that you would want to use ZenithOS, because ZenithOS is more true to Terry's original vision, again, versus Shrine. But hey, none of these are going to be used as a fucking daily driver anyways. You're never going to find anyone that's actually actually going to be using TempleOS or any of its fucking variants in their day-to-day life. Listen, Linux is 1% of the market share for desktop users as far as I know, 1 to 2%. And we're still lagging far behind when it comes to certain softwares and professional grade solutions. TempleOS, dude, they don't even have fucking Chrome browser, Brave browser, whatever. They don't even have FurryFox for TempleOS yet. Maybe they never will. TempleOS doesn't even have proper GPU support. So let's temper our expectations. Hell, write a spreadsheet in TempleOS and tell me how it is, ladies and gentlemen. Port LibreOffice, and maybe I could consider using it as a daily driver for something. That would be interesting. In fact, this one person actually wrote, I shit you not, I haven't tried this because I couldn't get it to work under Shrine, but they had a Discord client literally written for TempleOS. Yes, someone had a Discord, I think it's like a fucking front end where they were actually receiving messages from other users. I don't think you could join chat calls or whatever, but you could chat with your friends over Discord from TempleOS. Imagine, there is like 3 people right now on Discord using TempleOS as their fucking primary operating system. Maybe. It's wild. Imagine loading up a virtual machine just to load up God's operating system to talk with absolute losers on the internet sometimes on your weird Discord channels. That, ladies and gentlemen, is life fucking goals right there. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, this takes us to our finale and our conclusion. I think I've taken up way too much of your time as it is already, ladies and gentlemen. You know, TempleOS is a dream. TempleOS is magic in a way, all right? TempleOS is what happens when one person, all right, who is a talented individual on one end, a very, very talented individual on one end, but also a very disturbed individual on the other end. Terry Davis was a man who I guess a lot of people could easily write off as a crazy crackpot individual, one that has severe bouts of racism and other isms attached to him. But I guess if you can manage to look past all of that, I think one thing to understand is, as troubled as Terry was, what makes everything such a shame is Terry Davis was one of the most talented people that you could probably find on the internet right there. And sure, a lot of people can laugh off his operating system as just a joke, but I think people who can see the true value of one person's a sole enterprise developing all of this, their life work, is actually kind of substantial when you fucking think about it. Terry Davis might not have been the fucking smartest programmer available. I don't think that he was. But Terry was probably one of the most memorable programmers out there. Maybe in a lot of ways for the wrong reasons. But I like to remember Terry Davis as somebody that had a fucking dream and a vision. And in many ways, he met his fucking vision. And I hope wherever Terry Davis is, God is proud that he built the third temple. Even if it was just an operating system, even if it was just some computer thing that people look into and load in for 5 minutes, Terry made a fucking legacy. And that legacy is why tons of people have made videos on him. I'm making a video on him. And tons of people continue to even develop for TempleOS, even after his passing. I hope that wherever Terry Davis is, he's in a much better place. I know that he's in a much better place. And I hope the people that go through the same illnesses that Terry Davis went through can get the help that they need before the worst actually happens. Terry Davis is a perfect example of a man that is incredibly troubled, but a man that is also incredibly one of the most smartest people in his own way that exists in our world, or it existed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and this is all I got to say about TempleOS. So thank you for tuning in. I know it's a long video. This is a lot of stuff to cover. We deep dived into his operating system and even went beyond that. So ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am